You're listening to the Connecticut Real Estate Edge podcast, your source for tips and tricks on building wealth through real estate in Connecticut. You will get the best techniques from leading local experts in real estate and lending. Now, here's your host, Robert Weinberg.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode. I'm your host, Robert Weinberg, and in today's episode, we have John Tucci, one of the foremost experts on lakeside property, who'll be sharing with us essential tips on buying lakeside property. And in today's episode, we're going to be focusing on lakeside home ownership, environmental challenges that come with that, and some crucial tips for buyers, especially if you or someone that you know is looking to buy or owns lakeside property. Okay. John, thank you so much for taking time to come on with us today, brother.
It's great to be here. Looking forward to a great conversation.
I am too. So to start out, I want to talk about what inspired you to be so passionate for lakeside properties. And not only that, but the preservation of lakeside properties, because I think there's a lot of challenges that come with owning lakeside real estate a lot of people don't think about.
Exactly. Well, and I was one of those people who didn't think about it about 15 years ago. Going back 20 years ago now, we bought a property on a nice lake in Michigan. You can see it in my Zoom background here. When we bought it, it had a nice sandy beach and very clear water. But then 5 years later, because we got an invasive weed infesting the lake, that the Lake Association was told you just got to treat that with chemicals. It completely changed my shorefront from clear water and sandy beach to a foot of brown, smelly muck and way greener water during the height of the summer. In fact, the first time I took my toddler daughter down for her first swim in our beautiful lakefront cottage property in Michigan, her bathing suit got so black when she was splashing around that we had to pull her out of the lake, and we literally threw the bathing suit away. And that was the start of my journey. Because I'm looking at, boy, what did I do here? How'd this happen? And did I just make a giant mistake?
And how long after you bought your property there did you start having the problems in the lake?
Within 5 years.
Okay, so pretty quick. Okay.
Yep.
So as someone that owns lakeside property and even has expertise in that area, what would you say are some of the main issues, or I would say the unique challenges that come with owning a lakeside property versus just another piece of real estate?
Yeah, and there are several, but it really starts with anybody looking to buy a piece of lakefront property. They need to go in knowing that the lake that they're looking at cannot stay healthy and clean without a strategy and help from the community and the property owners around it. So you need to plan into your real estate purchase the fact that you need to invest in and protect this resource with some time and money that really makes your property. It's just like maintaining your home or maintaining your landscaping. Your lake needs maintenance as well. And the second corollary to that is not every lake that you're looking at property on is in the same condition today. So preferentially, you want to buy on a lake that is healthy versus a lake that's already in trouble. So every lake is at risk, but there are some lakes that are much healthier than others right now that have a better chance of staying healthy. And there are some lakes that, really need a lot of help to get them back to where you're going to fully enjoy that lakefront experience.
Okay, and what would you say are the key environmental factors that people need to pay attention to? Because generally when you're buying real estate, residential real estate, you're not looking at environmental factors. But when you're buying lakeside property, you have to, right? So what does that look like? What do people actually need to pay attention to? What are the metrics? What are the levels that are relevant, right?
Yes. Well, and you can get a little overwhelming in some of the science and details here, and we don't want to do that to too much overwhelm people in this podcast, but there are some keys to look at. And one is in which you can do just by talking to potential neighbors on the lake or looking on the internet to see what kind of water quality reports are on the lake. But a lot of lakefront property is bought and sold in the spring and in the late fall. And here's the trick about that. Nearly every lake looks great in the early spring and the late fall. You need to know what that lakefront and what that lake water looks like in July, August, and early September.
So
If you
seasonality,
don't,
seasonality is a
100%,
big part. We talk about that in the real
100%.
estate market. Seasonality plays into the condition of the lake. I think that's really a key factor that most people wouldn't even think of, right? I mean, hey, it
Yeah,
looks good, it looks amazing, let's go
yeah,
ahead, but they don't
it's
realize what
March.
you're talking
Yeah,
about.
it's March or April. The ice just came off the lake if you're in a northern lake, and the water's crystal clear and you can see the bottom. But that same lake 2 months later could be pea soup green. And if you don't know that, there's history. Lakes don't change, week, what it was like last year is going to be similar to what it was like this year. So most lakes, and this is part of another key that we'll talk about, is if a lake you're looking at property on does not have available water quality reports and an active association that's looking at these issues, my advice is to be very cautious about buying property on that lake, because they're way far behind in what it's going to take to ensure that that lake stays healthy or gets healthier over time.
Okay, so there is actual reports that people can request and get to ensure that the lake that they're buying on is in good condition, or at least you have some sort of knowledge and education about the lake. Now, my question to you would be, as someone that deals in lakeside property, what percentage of home buyers buying on a lake get those reports and really, really look at them? I mean, study them and or have them reviewed by an expert.
Less than 10%.
Oh, wow. Wow. So to all,
People, my experience is people buy the house, they buy the view, they don't buy the water quality or the shorefront quality, and we'll talk about that. So I really see three key factors that lakefront property owners need to focus on. Really four. We'll start before the factors. Number one, how do you want to use this property? That's the number one question you should understand the answer to. If you just want a house with a pretty view of water and you're not going to do a lot of boating, swimming, and in lake activities, then the condition of your shoreline, the in water shoreline area and the lake as a whole is not as critical as if you're a family that's buying on a lake so that your kids can swim right off your beach, or shorefront, or you can water ski and swim in that lake all summer without risk of the water being so green with algae that you could get sick from it. So first you got to know, what are my goals for buying this property? And then second, based on those goals, you got to really look at three key points. One is, what is the condition of the shoreline of the property I'm buying? Is it really weedy? Is it really mucky? Is the water stagnant in that area? That's what you need to look at. Second, what's the condition of the lake as a whole? Is it a generally healthy lake that just needs ongoing support for the community? Or is it a lake in peril? And just about every state with a lot of lakes actually has a list of lakes that they consider in peril or impaired.
and some buyers probably don't even know that the real estate
No
they're about
idea.
to drop hundreds of thousands or many millions on is in a lake that's considered to be in peril. Okay.
Right.
So I
Right.
think if our listeners right now take even just one piece, one nugget from this that could save them millions of dollars, okay,
Yes.
it would be get the environmental reports, study them, have them reviewed. If you're about to drop that money on a new property to buy for your own primary home or second home or even an investment property on a lake, it's worth getting those reports.
Yeah.
They're public, I assume, right? Public information
Yeah.
they can get through the realtor or whatnot, through the association, like you said. And you need to not only just get the reports and throw them aside, but get them and study them, know what you're getting into. Much like a
Right.
home inspection, much like a home appraisal, this to me is just as important when you're buying
Absolutely.
lakeside property. So my
Absolutely.
next question was actually going to be about mitigating the risks, but I think you've already said you get the environmental reports, you do your due diligence just like you would with the other home reports that you get during the home buying process, so that's really the most important thing. And then also check the list to see if the lake you're about to buy on is a lake that's known to be challenged or in peril, I believe was the exact term.
Yeah.
And if it is, you got to do a lot more due diligence. It may actually be a situation where if it's on that list, you might not want to buy. Like that's a huge red flag. That's like
Yeah.
buying a home with a crumbling foundation, if you ask
Yeah.
me, is buying a home on a
Uh,
lake in peril. Would you
yeah.
agree?
Yes, absolutely. Can I tell a quick story about
Yes,
that?
sir.
So I got a call earlier this season from a gentleman in Illinois who was looking at a gorgeous piece of property, undeveloped. I don't know if it's 10 or 20 acres on a lake on the border of Illinois and Wisconsin. And he's like, I found this property. This looks like my dream property. I really want to buy it, but I want your assessment as to how the lake is doing and what the shorefront is like. Um, so, I know what I'm getting myself into because I have a feeling when I've seen it, it's pretty weedy. I have a feeling I'm going to need to spend some money on it. And can you maybe help me? Well, I took the drive from my home in Michigan over to Illinois to take a look for this gentleman. And before he even got there, I got there before he did. I walked the property. I went down to the water and I was like, oh my God. I didn't even let him get down to the lake. I intercepted him when he drove in, him and his partner. I intercepted them and I said, we don't even need to go look at the lake. Run from this property as fast as you can. Literally, as far as the eye could see, from the shore was essentially a filled in swamp with weeds topped out. And he thought, hey, I'm a successful guy. I'm willing to invest some money in this water to make it better. And I was like, bud, unless you got $500,000 just to get started, this property is not the right one. So that's probably the most extreme example.
Mm-hmm.
And they walked away from that property because of that, and they saved themselves so many headaches because once they developed it, they never would have sold it. They never would have been able to get their money back out of it because that lake is never going to be anything anybody wants to
Okay.
be on.
So there is a point of no return then when it comes to saying, you know what, this is beyond the point that we can repair it or do a little bit of a
Right.
financial investment to get it working right or looking right. It sounds like it could literally take millions of dollars to take something that's in a bad scenario with a lake and turn it into a nice lake, pristine the way that you want it. So it's not even something that I would recommend getting involved in. Like he said, that extreme example just shows you if the lake is a problem, then don't buy the property,
Yeah.
right?
We
Walk
call
away.
it RTHA. Run the heck away.
That's it. That's
Run the
it.
heck away. Now, taking that down to more common experiences and practical tips, in some parts of the country, Michigan especially, and I don't know exactly, even it has to do with the prevailing wind and just the history of some of these lakes. Many lakes have a mucky side and a sandy side. So there are there's one shoreline of the
Mm-hmm.
lake that has predominantly nice sandy beaches, and there's another shoreline of the lake that's got more weeds and muck on it,
Right.
just because of the way the prevailing wind works.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean that you never buy a property on a mucky side of the lake. You might find the great
Oh,
house that you want,
absolutely.
but
Mm-hmm.
it does say that you need to know which side of the lake you're buying on. Are you buying, the property that's not going to need a lot of work at the shorefront to get it what you
Mm-hmm.
want? Or are you buying one that won't take millions of dollars, but it may take a couple $1,000 to do some things to get it cleaned up to where you want it? And you
Okay.
need to know that before you plunk down the money for the house, because you got to factor that into your cost of home ownership.
That's actually a question I would have for you is if you're buying on a lake, assuming it's in good condition, what would you say is an average annual maintenance cost for a lakefront property owner? Assuming it's in good condition, can you give me just an idea here?
Yeah, actually, I can. There's a couple different answers to that, but in general, I would budget about $1,000 a year minimum.
Oh, okay. That's reasonable. I was
But
thinking it would be 5 to 10 personally.
well, it can be on the front end if you've got a big
Mhm.
cleanup issue for
Right.
your area.
I'm talking about a lake that's already been done that and it's in good condition and we're just, maintaining that it's
Yeah,
in good
no, I think
condition.
a thousand or so, maybe
Okay.
1,500. Now,
Great.
some portion of that will be going to the overall lake management program for that lake that's funded through the lakefront properties, or even
Mhm.
in
Oh,
Michigan,
yeah,
we have
I've seen
special tax assessment.
associations and things like that. That actually brings me to my next question, which was about the community involvement. I think when you're talking about the HOA, the association, and the community, are you really talking about a homeowners association or are you talking about like the outlying city outside of that lake? What are you
It
referring to?
it can be all of the above. And so we talked about three factors that lakefront hot property owners need to look at. The first is the condition of the shoreline in their area, mucky side, sandy side. Second is the condition of the lake as a whole. The
Mhm.
third key factor is there an active association or structure for investing in the whole lake health
Mhm.
process? How active is that association or group?
Mhm.
If it's a town, we have one lake in Connecticut, Lake Pocatapog, which it's actually a municipal project. The lake is so central to the quality of life of the town that the town as a whole budgets for it. They've got a lake commission. The
Mhm.
lakefront property owners tend to do more with
Mhm.
that, but it's a town-based program and
Okay.
structure. There are other lakes where it's the association working with their township in concert to set up the funding program and administer the management program for the lake.
So based on
So
what
it
you're
does
saying,
vary.
it sounds like the community involvement, the homeowners association, the town, all of that, in some cases all, in some cases one of those, right, is essential. Like
Right.
if there's not involvement, if there's not an association, big red flags, right? You
Big.
really got to look deep. There needs to be, and I know personally, I've dealt with many, many clients over the years buying lakefront properties, and I've always seen those associations. And you'd be surprised to the home buyers out there how inexpensive a lot of times these associations are. It's not like a condo association in some cases where I've seen 500 a month or more. I've seen lakeside associations with quarterly dues that can be a few $100s, right? So not necessarily thousands. It depends on a lot of factors, but I say that because when people hear in the context of home ownership, another fee, another charge, another association, they're thinking a lot. And I've seen some, especially here in Connecticut. I think when I saw a few weeks ago, it was like $85 a quarter was their,
Yeah.
fee. And that's very reasonable. Now they weren't like direct, but they were in the lakeside community. And I assume as you get closer to the lakefront, the higher
Right.
those dues go. They were like a
Yeah.
house or two away, but they still had access to the whole
Got it.
lakeside
Yeah.
stuff. So I think that big takeaway is make sure you are knowing what you're getting into. Make sure you know who's maintaining and the different responsibilities of the lake. And if that's not being shown, and if you're not really like seeing that and it's not clear, big red flag, do more research, right? So I want to
Yeah.
shift for a second to talk about the long-term maintenance tips because we've been talking about like who's maintaining and all that, but like what is the long-term maintenance tips for a lake? You buy a lake, let's assume a lakefront property with a great lake. You don't need to spend a bunch of money up front to get it going. You're in a good spot. What is that long-term maintenance? What does the annual upkeep look like? Meaning like what do you do, right? And who
Yeah.
handles?
Yeah. Well, you do. I mean,
Okay.
especially in that situation where there's not a lot of work to do, which is ideal. But
Okay.
lakes, people need to know lakes are not swimming pools. If you want a swimming pool, build a swimming pool. Lakes are natural environments. They're going to have weeds. They're going to have periods where the water looks different today than it did a week ago or 2 weeks ago. And they're going to have some muck or sediment that collects on around the shoreline that if you don't maintain that and keep your lakefront clean, it's just going to accumulate more and more over time. And then your lakefront becomes a downward cycle where it's just becoming more and more mucky. And the more muck you have, the more weeds you have. So
Okay, so
the
it's a cleanup.
underlying,
It's an annual cleanup, basically,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
That's the main maintenance. And
yeah.
are
And
there
there's,
companies that do that that you can hire to say, hey, every year I want you guys to come and clean up my lakeside?
um, in some areas, yes. But mostly people have to get up to speed for themselves, and every
Okay.
lakefront property is a little different. And then we certainly help people. We do a lot where we mostly work on whole lake restoration, but we do a
Hmm.
lot of advising and helping of lakefront
Hmm.
property owners to say,
Okay.
okay, what problems do you have? How much muck is there? How weedy is it? What do the weeds look like? And we can kind of do that diagnosis for them and give them a prescription for what they need to do to get improvement going, whether that's to reduce the muck around their shoreline, handle the weed growth, or in some situations, we talk to these lakefront owners and we get on the web a little bit and do some looking at the reports, and we find, geez, this is a lake that needs a lot of help. So
Hmm.
yes, you got to do some things around your shoreline, but if you really want to be here long term, you need to start getting active in the association and start pushing for change. Or, and we help people do this, you need to think about selling that property because it may not be what you want 10 years, 2 years from now, 5 years, 10 years from now, and maybe look for a different lake situation. You've got to be a little cold hearted in this process, because if, for example, it's a lake that needs help and you give it a good try to organize some of your neighbors to work to get the association to wake up to the fact that more needs to be done, and the rest of your neighbors around the lake are not willing to invest a few $100s a year, or maybe $1,000 or $1,500 a year each to significantly improve the health of that lake, I got news for you. That lake's not getting any better on its own. So if you don't like it today, if you don't like your lake today and your lakefront today, and you've tried to do something about it and you can't make it what you want, it's not going to be better 2 years from now, 5 years from now. Impossible. All the trends are moving toward lakes being under more stress from invasive weeds, from
Hmm.
fertilizers around the watershed, all of this stuff that causes weeds, algae, and muck to grow and accumulate in the lakes. They're all moving in the direction
Okay.
of making it harder for a lake to stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a correlation with the lake health and the enjoyment of the lake. And I think that's what you're talking about because,
Yes,
you look at the lakefront and any lakeside property and the view of it, and it's a beautiful view. And I think even if there's weeds or something below the surface, it's still a beautiful view, right? But there's also people that want to use that lake for boating and
right.
fishing and this and that and swimming too. Even if it's not a swimming pool, hey, there's fun to be had on the lake. Wakeboarding, I remember doing as a kid, water skiing, all that stuff down at some lakes that I grew up down in Miami that
Yep.
were very near my home. So, lake can be great, but I think it's economics, right? We're talking about home buying, and home ownership in general here on a lakeside. And would you say that there's a major correlation when a lake is not doing well, when it's in peril or moving in that direction? Do you see a major decrease in property values? And I want to talk a little about how the economics are impacted, even though you might have a beautiful home, if it's on a lake in peril or a negative situation on the lake, like how can that affect the property value and the appreciation that so many are betting on when they buy a home, right?
Yeah, there's been studies on this. So state of Maine, state of Minnesota have studied this very carefully. And in fact, for every 2 foot loss in water clarity, property values tend to go down by 10 to 15%.
Wow.
That doesn't mean your
Wow.
property won't appreciate, but it'll appreciate way less than on a
Right.
lake that has 10 feet of water clarity, 8 feet of water clarity, 12 feet of water clarity.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense, especially because the more water clarity, the more value there is when it comes to just water sports, and fishing, I think, is very big with that, right? And isn't that one
Everything.
of the main reasons people buy on a lake is for fishing opportunities, would you say?
Um,
No?
I think
Doesn't
I
sound
know.
like it.
I think in our experience, most people buy on a lake because they want the peace, relaxation. They want to be near water. Water is restorative.
Mhm.
And they want to use the water. They want the recreate. Imagine you can have a backyard that you can, that's a quarter of an acre or eighth of an
Yep,
acre,
yep,
but then you've got this whole other playground of a lake that you can
yep.
tube on, you can paddleboard on,
Jet ski.
you can jet ski, you can bird watch on, you can do all,
Oh,
see the
yeah.
turtles. I mean, the wildlife
So
on a lake,
much you can
the
do.
blue heron, the herons and the eagles and the ospreys. I mean, it's like watching nature TV right out of your backyard in a
Mhm.
way that you can't get from just having a beautiful backyard. It's
No,
different.
that's you bring up some great points. I think that's why people love lakeside properties. I think that's why I've always gravitated. I don't own one, but I wish I did. And I definitely take an opportunity to do like a short-term rental home, an Airbnb or something on a lakeside property. I encourage everyone to do that to support the homeowners. Because by you getting into buying, selling, or even renting a lakeside property, you're supporting the lake community by doing that. You are.
For
That
sure. Yeah.
money indirectly does go to that lake and restoring that lake. So, as we wrap up here, can we talk about, other than just keeping it clean every year, what are some effective methods people can use to, get their lake clean and healthy without chemicals? Other than just keeping the upkeep, like cleanliness, is there something specific they can be doing to keep it clean, Because people don't like using chemicals nowadays. They're looking for cleaner ways.
Yeah, well, that's the heart of our business. And every lake, kind of the best approach is to make sure that you've got a lake community that understands that the lake needs to be invested in. And then it's a matter of no lake is perfect. So we assess the problem and we come up with a prescription that might involve aeration and using some natural biological, like probiotics almost for the lake to help eat up the fertilizers and nutrients.
Mhm.
And we can do some of that on a shoreline basis as well and help give people tools to clean up their shoreline faster if they did buy on a nice lake, but they happen to be on the mucky side, the more mucky side of the lake. So we can do that. I think the biggest tip is, I'll be crass here. The best advice I can give to potential lakefront property owners is it's really hard to make chicken salad out of chicken crap.
Good point.
The
Good point.
nicer lake you buy on in the first place, the the less money you're going to have to spend, the less time you're going to have to invest getting the lake association moving in the right direction. And that is my best advice to potential lakefront property
That's
owners.
great advice. It
Yeah.
really is. You can invest on the front end in a nicer home, nicer community, nicer lake, or you can invest on the back end over years trying to get that lake into good condition, trying to make sure that the issues that caused it to be in peril are no longer there. And that can cost a lot more over the long run. I think we all can relate to that with things in our
Yeah.
lives. So one last question I
I got,
have.
yeah, and
Oh, go ahead.
one more thing came
Yeah.
up, because this is something anybody can be thinking about when they're looking at lakefront property. There are many different kinds of lake, man-made, natural, and everybody thinks a natural lake is better than man-made. That's can be generally true, but here's the reason why. If you're looking at property on a lake that is what we call a wide spot on a river, meaning it's got a big river or stream flowing into it, and it's got a dam at one end, and it's just, kind of a lake in the middle of a
Mm-hmm.
river that flows through. Very challenging if that lake has impairment problems to fix those problems, because that lake community can do very little to affect what's going on way upstream of that river, versus a lake that's more of a glacial lake. It's a bowl. It has maybe a small little brook or this or that coming into it, but it's not a lake that has a tremendous amount of flow through from a big area
Mm-hmm.
upstream. Those generally are lakes that, even if they are impaired, they're easier to fix than these lakes that are a wide spot in a river.
It's a good point. Definitely an opportunity there with that type of lakeside property. So, future trends for lakeside properties. Things are always evolving in real estate. Things are always evolving in, how people treat their properties, right? So, with technology, with, the economy, with innovation going on, what do you see as general trends when it comes to lakeside property? And I'm talking about trends over the next 5 to 10 years specifically.
um, I I wish I could say that the picture 5 to 10 years from now is rosy. One of the reasons why I'm on this podcast, and hope to do others too, is that the public that cares about lakes need to understand that these lakes are under threat, and the state agencies and the regulators in most states have their head in the sand. So they're not pushing innovation. They're not investing enough money into the maintenance and restoring the health of these lakes. So if you're a lakefront property owner now, or you want to be one, pl- plan on being an activist for your lake. Plan on, being willing to work with the association to contact your local state representative or senator to say, hey, we need investment. And, our property taxes are what fuels this town around this lake, but the lake is going to heck.
Mhm.
We need some money to make it better, or their property tax base is going to go. So I think the trend is that we people who care about lakes need to get more vocal, more active, and more together in our voice to government bodies to say, these resources need your help. The data is clear. Blue-green algae blooms, all these problems are getting worse and
What's
worse.
the data? What percentage of lakes in the United States are in peril, or heading in that direction? What percentage? Is there data on that?
Well over 50%.
Okay. That's it. We're in trouble. That's
Yeah,
environmental trouble, right?
right.
So, I think the trend I see from talking to you and just in general in the economy is, especially on lakefront, short-term rental. And I mentioned that a few minutes ago, because I think these
Yeah.
lakeside
Oh, yeah.
properties are becoming more and more expensive. There's more maintenance required. And I think a lot of the homeowners, like many across the country, are just not financially prepared for some of the investment that's required. So they're then taking their property when they're not going to be there.
Yeah.
Let's put it on one of these short-term rental websites, Airbnb, VRBO.
Yeah.
Let's rent it out for 300, 500, 1,000 a night or more for some of these,
Well,
right?
and I need to jump in on that, because it's something I get passionate about. The experts, and our own instinct as lakefront property owners is to get mad at those people that are doing the daily rentals. Oh, it's because they're doing Airbnb that the lake is getting worse. They're ruining the lake. Not true at all. And so the powers that be want us to be fighting each other as property owners, so that we're not banding together to demand that the environmental problems that are not the fault of any property owner, or not totally the fault. We're all responsible for some fertilization of the lake, but it becomes a divide. I'm not saying they're doing this consciously, but we see a lot of lakes that start to fight each other because they see the lake getting worse and they blame each other around the lake, when they really should be working together to get more resources devoted to protecting that lake, their own and their towns and their state's resources.
Absolutely. And what I'd like to say as kind of a closing comment to everyone is, looking at buying on a lakefront, renting on a lakefront, whatever it may be, if you're going to be involved in lake property, you need to be prepared to be an activist. You need to be prepared to help turn the tide, because right now our lakes are in trouble. And I can't say I didn't know they were, because I kind of knew they were, but I wasn't talking to an expert like you who really sheds light on who, what, where, when, and why this is happening and how we can fix it. So if you're going to be buying property on a lake specifically, you need to be prepared to fix that lake and be part of the solution. And if you're going to ignore it or just be someone who wants the good view and doesn't give two what's about it, then you shouldn't be buying it at all. Okay. You're hurting the environment, you're hurting the others in the community, and you're hurting the market in general, the real estate market there, which really affects everyone economically. So I want to thank John for coming on. And I think an important resource that you have, and everything that you're doing with helping property owners and people that are buying and own property on Lakeside. So if you can give your contact info, those that want to use you and your resources, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, our website is a great resource. So www.everbluelakes.com. Visit, you can get a lot of good education there. My personal email is jtucci, JTUCCI, @everbluelakes.com. And I take phone calls anytime, anywhere, any place. You're welcome to call me too. It's 269-389-0644. That's direct to me. We love talking to lakefront homeowners and potential lakefront homeowners, because it helps us learn about different lakes around the country and which ones that we might be able to help over time.
I think the resources that you bring are unparalleled, because I think a lot of people don't even know they need them, and they need them so much. So I want to thank everyone for taking your time out, as always, and listening into our episode today. And if it's your first time, go ahead and subscribe to us here. Leave a review. Those 5-star reviews really help us get exposure all over. And stay tuned, as always, for our next episode with more real estate insights coming at you. Robert Weinberg signing off, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
Thanks for listening. If you have questions about the information we've covered or would like to discuss mortgage financing for your situation, you can reach Robert Weinberg by visiting www.robgw.com.